Essentially, I woke up one morning in November, early November 2024, and I had lost hearing in my left ear, and I actually ended up with quite significant facial palsy on my left. 3 or 4 weeks later, I actually think it might have been 6 weeks later, I was sitting here on a call, very much like talking to you, and I all of a sudden lost hearing in my right ear as well. And so back in hospital, and they essentially tracked it down and diagnosed as the shingles virus. But I was laying in the hospital bed after they'd got rid of the vertigo and stuff. So this was probably a couple hours later, and I was already searching for technology.
Right.
So I wasn't like, oh no, what's this gonna do? I'm like, okay, I better get some tech so that I can keep working.
Well, did your wife say to you, what the heck you're doing?
Yeah. She wanted me to retire. She absolutely wanted me to retire. I said, there is no way I'm retiring. There is a significantly larger group of people who have, greater health issues and greater challenges in life than I do. I've got many, many, many things to be grateful for. There's no reason to let something this minor get in the way.
Chris, thank you very much for joining me on Success Matters. We've known each other for a long time, me primarily as your customer, I suppose, and your client. And yeah, you've been doing this work for quite some time under Spy Group. Let's start really with your background. You told me you were CEO at quite a young age of two different companies. And what were those companies in, and how did you come to become CEO at such a young age?
Well, I actually always had the goal. When I first started in my career, I set myself a goal to be a CEO by the age of 35.
Okay.
Interestingly enough, I was able to achieve that at the age of 32. But as I reflect back, it was not by any sort of destined path or pre planned path. It was very much around, just being passionate about what I do. And I think one of the things that really sort of dawned on me as I've really looked back, a lot of what I was doing was questioning the status quo. So my role started out as any normal, young 18-year-old. I started my life in a call center. I was a call center agent, and I worked in the call center industry in roles like I led a workforce management team. Then I worked for a boutique consulting firm, and then I found my way into Nortel as a product manager for their contact center products. And it was interesting, Sanjay. I joined Nortel. I was so frustrated as a contact center user, as a buyer and an operator. It used to frustrate me that vendors would say, here's our product, now you need to change the way your business works to satisfy our technology. And I said, this is all backwards. It needs to be the other way around. So I went into Nortel with this wonderful ambition of I was going to change the vendor. I didn't, by the way. They were big, bureaucratic, and lumbering, but I enjoyed my time there and I learned a lot. And it was actually my role in Nortel that launched me from a product manager to a CEO. And I became the CEO of a small systems integration company here in Australia. And again, what was interesting was that board took a big bet on me. I was an unproven, untested CEO. But what I was someone was willing to question the status quo. And that company had been flat revenue wise for 20 years. So for 20 years, our revenue had not grown. In 2 years, we grew that business at 16.5% compound, which was an amazing result for that company. And that led me to my second CEO role, which is a large outsourced contact center BPO. I was part of a global organization. I was the CEO for Australia and New Zealand, but I had contact centers both here in Australia and in the Philippines, servicing the Australian and New Zealand customer base. I will say this, my second time round as a CEO, I think I did a better job. I learned a lot of things that I thought in my first one, I thought you've got to have all the answers. In my second one, I knew I didn't need to have all the answers. My job was to guide, my job was to help with decision making. So I think I was a far better CEO the second time around. Grew that business at 22% compound for the nearly 3 years that I was there. Why did I leave CEO? You're probably thinking. It was I loved being a CEO, absolutely loved it. But there were two things that I felt I really wasn't getting out of that role. One, I felt that whilst I was helping people with their careers, I really wasn't doing that personally. I was doing that through the organization. And I take great pride in being able to help people with their futures and their career and where they wanted to go. So it was sort of like an indirect contribution. And the second one was I was making a lot of people a lot of money, and I'm like, this is crazy. Why am I not doing this for myself? And so, my now business partner, Jim Hayes, and I were introduced by a very good friend of ours, and we just hit it off straight away. We were finishing each other's sentences within the first 4 hours of talking. And really, we just went from there. Very like minded, similar values, and a similar belief that ultimately a lot of companies are not getting the outcomes that they want from their technology investments. And that's less of an issue for those companies and more of an issue for the sellers. So that's where we focus.
Right. Okay. So, and Spy Group now is primarily focused on the sales relationships, or do you do the sort of whole end to end for a business consultancy?
It's a little deeper than that. Yes, we do consider ourselves a consultancy firm, and our big focus is on how we help our clients innovate what we call the go to client model, not the go to market model. Because the go to market model assumes that every customer is generic. They're the same, they're average. In a go to client model, you recognize that every single client is different and they're unique and they've got their own situations that need to be managed and evolved. And so we help our clients to think about how they're going to take a much more differentiated approach.
Hmm.
Now, I
Okay.
believe we were probably one of the first to come out with what we call an outcome-based model. So we first developed that model way back in 2008, 16, 17 years ago. And it's been really interesting to watch our clients. Some have embraced it passionately and deeply and had significant success. Others have sort of dabbled in that space and they've still had success, but not the same success to those that really embraced it.
Mm, okay. And so the last sort of 17 years been based around that. And let's basically you've been very successful in doing this and making big inroads with regards to your business. Um, but life changed for you overnight, not so long ago, a few months ago. So tell us a bit about what happened and the background to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I'll give you the short version. Essentially, I woke up one morning in November, early November 2024, and I had lost hearing in my left ear, and I actually ended up with quite significant facial palsy on my left.
Mhm.
And the doctors didn't know what was causing it. I was in and out of hospital with vertigo and dizziness. And, they really didn't know. And then about 3 or 4 weeks later, I actually think it might have been 6 weeks later, I was sitting here on a call, very much like talking to you, and I all of a sudden lost hearing in my right ear as well. And
Mhm.
so back in hospital, and they essentially tracked it down and diagnosed as the shingles virus. So the shingles virus essentially attacked my eighth cranial nerve, essentially destroying my hearing in both ears. So a complete 100% profound hearing loss and my balance. So still have the facial palsy, but a lot better now.
Mhm.
But completely lost my hearing with no path to recovery and completely lost my balance. And so I've got to retrain my brain to use my eyes and my feet for balance because I don't have my ears for balance. So significantly life changing, Sanjay. I'll say up until that point, I basically hadn't had a sick day in nearly 30 years of working, and I ended up having to take 5 weeks off to sort of get my balance back to at least where I can walk, and then also start to think about how I'm going to work and do what I love. With a situation now where I talk for a living, and all of a sudden I can't hear.
Yeah, that is a fundamental thing. And I know also from experience working with you that you have been working like you support customers all around the globe. So you're working long hours, odd hours as well in some regards. So that sudden, loss of hearing, that for me, when I sort of put myself in your shoes, and I might be completely wrong about this, but it's kind of like, what do you do? Right? It's a moment where you think, has my world finished in terms of what I know and how am I going to change? So how did you handle that and all those thoughts that go through your mind and the potential drift into negativity that can happen from something of that nature.
It can, and a lot of people I talk to had similar experiences. That's certainly what they told me.
Mhm.
Surprisingly for me, Sanjay, it didn't happen. I mean,
Right.
literally the day that I lost my right ear and was completely deaf, instantly my mind to, well, I've got tons of technology I can use to overcome this.
Mhm.
So I've actually built out quite an array of technology. I have some AI glasses that what they do is that they ingest the audio, send it to a cloud server, convert it to text, and then it appears on the screen on my glasses as closed captions, which works amazing when I'm sort of out and about and talking to people. For
Mhm.
my, these calls, all the platforms that my clients use, Zoom, WebEx, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, they all have closed captions, and it's been absolutely amazing. Really, really amazing. I almost feel like I haven't missed a beat. I've got applications on my iPad and my phone which do speech to text. I'm just starting to learn sign language, and my lip reading is getting better. Not good,
Right.
but it's getting better. So it was interesting for me. I didn't look at it necessarily that I had gained deafness. Sorry, that I had lost hearing, more so that I had gained deafness. And deafness for me wasn't a negative. It was something that says, okay, I've just got to learn how to appreciate there's better and different ways to communicate. And hearing is not everything.
Mm. And that's a really good point because I recorded a podcast episode with a gentleman called Oscar Trimboli, who's written a book, and he's actually a listening expert. And so when you think about listening, you might think it's about hearing, but actually, if you read his book and listen to the podcast, it is so much more than just about what comes in through your ears. And when we were preparing for this, you said that now it's made you much more focused on the other aspects of interaction that we have with each other.
Oscar's amazing. I had the great pleasure of spending a lot of time with Oscar when he's back in his Microsoft days, nearly 20 years ago. And in fact, I will tell you, I know that you appreciate some of my LinkedIn work. Some of my methods and discipline for writing in LinkedIn actually came from the mentorship of Oscar.
Oh, wow.
So he's very good. I mean, it's interesting. For me, one of the big aha moments in losing my hearing was the realization that I actually thought that I was very present in calls.
Mhm.
You're sitting here, you're talking to someone, and you believe you're very present. You're making lots of eye contact, but your mind still wanders, and you might look out the window and you can still hear the conversation, but your mind might start to wander onto some other subject, even though you're still listening.
Mm.
What I found when I lost my hearing is when I've got to stare at a box, and if I take my eyes off that box, I can no longer participate in the conversation. It means you give 100% of your attention to the call that you're on. So I actually look at it in many ways, it's elevated. It's elevated my engagement with my clients. It's made me far more present. And people who say they listen, I don't think you listen until you have to stare at a box for 6 hours straight.
Yeah, that's true. And we're in a world where people's attention spans are reducing. I read recently that TED Talks are talking about reducing the length of their TED Talks because people's attention spans aren't there anymore. So you're right. We think we're listening, but the reality is we're not really paying full attention to the person in front of us. Um, and part of that actually, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, okay, part I'm not fully listening to you because I'm thinking of, okay, well, what's the next part of our conversation going to look like, and where am I going to take this conversation now? So that's an element of that. Um, you also mentioned that you lost your balance. So how does that affect you in your day to day?
It's actually it's interesting. When I'm sitting, my balance is fine. It was predominantly when I'm walking. And so the essentially the attack on my central nervous system says the messages from my ears don't make it to my brain. So my ears are perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with my ears at all. And your ears make up about 80%, 90% of your balance. The other remaining percentages are your eyes and your feet. Losing that, because now the messages from my ears can't get to my brain, Now what I have to use is my eyes and my feet. So it's really interesting. If it's dark or if it's uneven ground, I find it really challenging. I can't even stand still. I feel like I'm going to fall over. I find it hard to walk. Also, when I'm a bit tired, and I tend to walk now looking down at the ground so that I can sort of see where my feet are going. So my brain is connecting. That's where it is. So I will say the balance has probably had a greater impact on me than anything else. I haven't done any running since this occurred. I haven't tried to run yet. I certainly haven't tried to ride a bike. So there's a few things there. And also, we were away recently. My wife wanted to take a walk down to a waterfall, and it was really challenging because all the path was rocky and uneven. So that was quite challenging. So yeah, I'd say the balance has actually had a greater impact on me than the hearing.
Right. Okay. But recently you traveled to Toronto to a conference and this a seminar that you were running. So how did that work out for you?
I
Both
did. I did. It was it
and
was
balance.
actually it was really interesting. I was a little nervous. I was nervous about. I always like to ensure that my clients get an amazing experience, and I was grateful that my business partner was with me. And I was really nervous that I thought I'd probably lose maybe 30% of the conversation. But with the array of technology that I took with me, my AI glasses, I probably only missed 1 or 2% of the conversation. And what was really interesting was the 40 odd people in the room blown away. In fact, people said to me at the end, they said, Chris, if you didn't tell us you were deaf, we wouldn't have known.
Hmm. Yeah. That's brilliant, right? The use of technology and how it can help nowadays. But what about the balance side? How did that work for you?
So the balance side was okay because again I was in hotels and office buildings, so the ground was flat and well lit, so it was pretty good. I mean, walking through the airport when I was a little busy was a little bit of a challenge, but most of the time I was either sitting on a plane or I was, in an office, so it didn't affect me too badly. I had a couple of little minor incidents. What I found when I was facilitating the conversation, I like to walk around the room, and a couple of times I like felt myself, about to fall over. So I decided no more walking around the room. Let's just stay put in the middle of the room.
Right, yeah, understood. So what do you put your positivity down to? Because I'm amazed by the fact that, your statement that, I've not lost a hearing, I've gained deafness. That's such a positive outlook on the situation you found yourself in overnight almost. What is that down to?
Well, I think it's a really good question, Sanjay. I've reflected on this a little bit because I've had several people ask me. I just put it down to I love what I do.
Mhm.
I love everything that I do. I love, my job. I love my clients. I love my family. I love my hobbies. I'm a big car guy, so I spend a lot of time on my cars. And I love what I do. And to me, these are minor inconveniences. None of those things, in my opinion, are going to stop me doing what I love to do. And I'm grateful for the technology. I mean, I think about these AI glasses. Yeah, they're fairly new. There's a few brands out there now. The ones I use are really good on transcription services, which are why I got those ones. But 5 years ago, I would not have had the technology to do what I do now, so I consider myself extremely lucky, and I also compare myself to many other people in the world. There is a significantly larger group of people who have, greater health issues and greater challenges in life than I do. I've got many, many, many things to be grateful for. There's no reason to let something this minor get in the way.
No, that's so great to hear, and it's so true as well. I'm still in awe of you, Chris. It's like, the fact that this thing came your way, or maybe it's because of my belief system, right? My belief system of how I've seen other people who have had challenges come their way, and the negativity that has drawn them down a spiral, which, is something that, yeah, it's just like I said, I'm in awe. I'm in awe of the way you're tackling this.
Well, thank you. I do really appreciate that. That does mean a lot. I mean, honestly, what my answer before was right. At no point. I mean, I can tell you. the moment I lost my hearing, I did have to go straight to hospital because was actually my balance. I couldn't walk. Um, but I was laying in the hospital bed after they'd got rid of the vertigo and stuff. So this was probably a couple hours later, and I was already searching for technology.
Right.
So I wasn't like, oh no, what's this gonna do? I'm like, okay, I better get some tech so that I can keep working.
Mm.
I mean, literally, probably within 2 hours, I'd already ordered about 4 or 5 things.
But, did your wife say to you, "What the heck you doing?" Or why was there
Yeah.
what he was thinking?
Oh yeah.
It's
Yeah, yeah.
oh,
She wanted me to retire. She absolutely wanted me to retire. I said, there is no way I'm retiring.
yeah, fair enough. So we started, you said that at the age you set out to be a CEO by the age of 30, and that at that time, that was what success looked like for you. You're now wherever you are in your late to mid 50s. What does success mean to you now?
Success now is actually making a dent in people's universe. One of the things I love is when people say to me, Chris, you really helped me think different, believe different things, engage differently, and go on a different path. And I love seeing the best of people come through. And I get really excited when they have success. And sometimes that's big success, sometimes that's little success, sometimes they might get promoted, sometimes they might miss out on a role. But watching people grow and watching them learn and watching them change, for me, that is the greatest reward that I get from what I do. And, it's one of these things that the more I engage with people, the more passionate I get about helping others. And the fact that I can do that and make a living out of that, for me is just, it's amazing. Uh, this situation has been an interesting one, Sanjay, in that I have decided that trading time for money, which is traditionally what you do in a consulting business,
Mhm.
is not a sustainable path for me in case anything else happens. So, my business partner, Jim Hayes, and I, we're talking about how we start to create some new revenue streams. And one of those that we've started looking at the moment is building an AI based application around a lot of the thinking concepts that we do, because a lot of what we focus on is mindset and belief system change, identity change. We're not interested really in a lot of the mechanical things that people do. Helping people unleash is getting into their mindsets, their belief systems, their identity, and turning that into an application that allows people to be successful is one of the areas we're just starting to explore now.
Yeah, what you said there about mindset, belief, and identity, those are the three drivers that either drive us forward or hold us back, depending on which way you look at it, right? And so getting into that is much more important than the mechanics of how you do something. And so I've, that really resonates with me, what you just said about seeing people and helping them and seeing them go on the journey, because that's a journey I've been on, and you've seen my journey yourself. From where I was to where I am today.
It really is, Sanjay. And I think, part of where I am now and how I feel now in terms of, the situation that happened to me, a lot of it is shaped from my identity and beliefs.
Mm,
But we talk about the difference between what's visible to others and what's not visible to others, what's invisible. And what's invisible to others is your passion to serve, your belief systems, your identity. Those are not visible to others. What is visible to others are your behaviors and habits, the things that you do. And we have a saying here at the Aspire Group, which is behaviors betray beliefs. If I tell you I believe one thing, but I behave in the opposite way, then I've lied to you about my belief, because your behaviors they are directly attributable to your belief system. So again, we love engaging with our clients on the invisible, because the invisible is where you create significant growth, significant differentiation, and really high performing teams.
yeah, and that whole piece, I love that saying, behaviors betray beliefs or show belief, because it's so true, right? Well, people will say one thing, but the belief inside of them could be something completely different, and that only shows through the behaviors and habits that they have, that you observe or witness as oftentimes as an external third party looking in, because that's the advantage of the role you do is you're a you don't come with any baggage, any history. You're in a third party observing a situation and can make a judgment call as to how things are panning out.
And it's actually really interesting inflection point in time for us as a generational inflection point because what in the past people really sort of valued themselves by their specialization, their deep knowledge, their deep expertise. That was considered to be, the foundation of their identity. And so we used knowledge and we used speciality as that metric. But now knowledge is completely commoditized, it's democratized. Knowledge is available to everyone on the planet as long as you've got an internet connection. Now, with the profound, advent of AI, any question can be answered in 10 seconds or less. So if knowledge is ubiquitous and knowledge is completely open available, we believe the next generation is around wisdom, specifically applied wisdom, and how people, start to unlock their imagination, their curiosity, their learning, their passion, and really build out wisdom. That's going to be the major identity change that we're going to see here in the next 5 to 10 years. Identities have to move away from knowledge, speciality, intelligence, and really move to wisdom. And that's going to be a profound shift. Some people aren't going to make it.
Yeah, and um, I'm reminded of people who, certainly here in the late sort of 80s and 90s in the UK, we had a lot of change in the industrial landscape. What were solid industries before were no longer solid industries. And those people that identified themselves as miners, for example, and that was their identity, there was no longer a mine for them to mine in. They struggled with that change, but others who identified themselves as having those transferable skills that, yes, I was a miner, but actually now I can go into tunneling or I can go into construction work or I can start to talk to people about foundations and whatever else, they were able to move forward. And so that shift is coming, as you say, for the knowledge workers as well, that knowledge now is commoditized. So if you identify as, I don't know, a lawyer, and that's your identity, that
It's funny you should mention the term knowledge worker, Sanjay. I was having a conversation again with my business partner, Jim Hayes, and he came up with a term that we really liked. So he said, we've got to move away from knowledge workers and we need to become applied wisdom integrators.
yeah, that's exactly it. That's that shift, that fundamental shift that's going to happen, right? And so be prepared for it, I think is the kind of the message for this. So I have a tradition on my podcast that I ask a previous guest to ask a question for my next guest. Um, you've kind of answered it actually, but I'll read out the question to you, and you can kind of elaborate on
Mhm.
that. Um, so my previous guest asked, how could they be successful in empowering and noticing other people who could do better and helping them to achieve that?
It's an interesting question. I'm actually going to tell a story here about Tony Robbins. So, Tony Robbins has this one of the in one of his big workshops that does. He talks about the difference between dabblers and masters. And he says, everyone, as you continue to go through your own personal growth, and we all go through growth, and at every point in growth, you have this big uptick in growth, and then you hit a plateau.
Mhm.
The growing sort of stops. You're sort of tapped out as much as you can learn on that. And he said the difference between a dabbler and a dabbler says, I've hit the plateau. I can't go any further. I've maxed out my learning. And he said a master, they go, the plateau to be expected. And they go and find people who can help them break through the plateau and go on the next level of journey.
Mhm.
One of the things I'm very passionate about is learning, but more importantly, unlearning. You can't put more in your cup if your cup is already full. So, how I try and help people be successful and what I've embraced is unlearning is actually more important than learning. So, bringing a level of discipline to unlearning where you're constantly challenging your own behaviors, your own belief systems, your own biases, your own self limiting beliefs, or deeply held assumptions that are holding you on the plateau. When you
mm.
start to challenge those and you can bring the right people to mentor you and challenge you, you can break through that plateau and go on to the next evolution of your learning.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I haven't come across that Tony Robbins kind of perspective. I've listened to a lot of his work and what he does, but it's so true that we have you need to unlearn things to be able to learn new things, because otherwise those things you think you know hold you back. And actually, there's a science, in science, for example, science moves on at quite a fast pace. And so what I did in my degree nearly 40 odd years ago probably is no longer true, but I might be holding on to what I thought was true in my degree in chemistry, but actually it's moved on so massively from that. And so letting go of what was there and thinking about the future and what's now is so important. So I love that.
And it's interesting you should mention science, Sanjay, because again, as a student of objectivity and as a student of constantly questioning something, I hear these terms bandied around now, believe the science. But if you go and talk to a scientist's number one role is to disprove the science.
Yeah.
Their profession is to what we believed is true is no longer true. And the example I use, which obviously a very Australian example, is in the past, if you got bitten by a snake, they would cut the limb off. Now, if we didn't continually question, is that the right thing to do, we'd still be cutting limbs off. We no longer do that. We proved that that wasn't the best way. There were better ways to deal with snakebite. And so I'm absolutely this passionate believer that we have to continually question everything. And again, I'll quote Elon Musk here. He said, often the answer is the easy part. The hard part is coming up with the right question. And
Mm,
often when you think about what we do, we might continue to operate the same way we will have. We don't see the level of change in ourselves that we want because we're not asking ourselves the right question.
mm. And that links so well to the world of AI that we've just spoken about, right? That you can ask AI a particular prompt and you get one answer. Ask it a good question, and you'll get a different answer and the maybe the right answer, right, to what you're looking for. So that's yeah, you brought it full circle to where
I
we are.
totally agree. Totally agree.
So do you have a question for my next guest, Chris?
I do. So for your next guest, I'd love you to ask them the common question that people get asked is, what's your superpower?
Hmm.
And it's a great question. But there's a better question. What's your kryptonite? And how do you deal with situations where your kryptonite is in your perimeter?
Right. Okay. What's your kryptonite? That's a really good question. Do you know what your kryptonite is, Chris?
By the way, I'll tell you what mine is a second, but I'll give you the basis behind that question. Big believer in mental models and mental models and building a lattice work of mental models. That question actually comes from a mental model that Charlie Munger invented called inversion. So,
Mhm.
whatever everyone's normally thinking, what's the inversion of that? What's the opposite of that? My kryptonite is that I am I'm so passionate about my clients that I give so much to them that I often don't give them the chance to go on the journey first. So I'm pushing them outside their comfort zone, wanting them to go harder, wanting them to go bigger, wanting them to change more. And sometimes I need to recognize they've got to go at their own pace. And so it becomes a little uncomfortable because I want to see them go further. I know they can do more. I can see it, I can feel it, and I get a little frustrated that they're not unleashing their true self. And sometimes I just need to remind myself, they've got to go on their journey at their pace, not at my pace.
Mm, yeah, that's so true. And when you're observing, it's also like parenting as well, right? As parents, you often say to your children, or "Oh, why aren't you doing this? Why are you doing that?" Because you've got a pace in your mind, and they've got to learn. They've got to learn the journey, just the same way they learned how to walk by falling down. You didn't like keep on picking them up. You let them fall to learn to walk. It's a similar sort of concept, isn't it?
Yeah, there's an amazing amount of sort of underutilized talent in the many, many people that I have the great pleasure of coaching and mentoring. I mean, untapped talent. But it's not for me to say, here's the key, unlock it. They've
Mm.
got to unlock their own key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, Chris, we're nearly at the top of our time. If people want to get in touch with you or to find out more about the work that you do, what's the best way for them to contact you?
I would say they can call me, but I can't take calls anymore. So the best way to get hold of me is on email, and that's just chris.luxford at aspiregroup.com.
Okay, chris.luxford at aspiregroup.com. Okay, that's brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your time, Chris.
Right.
I've loved this conversation. Every time we speak, yeah, with me as your client as well, it's been a great, great conversation. So thank you for sharing, your journey, your personal wisdom, and the positivity, the outlook that you have on life. I think a lot of people can learn a lot from that.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. And as I tell everyone, I get more from these conversations than people probably realize. And sometimes I think I get more out of the conversation than the person I'm coaching.
Is you and I both, we both feel that, I think. So yes, thank you very much, Chris. To find your success, contact me at info@successmatterscoaching.com. That's info@successmatterscoaching.com.